Our guest on This is America in the World is Clarence Page. He's the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, nationally syndicated by the Chicago Tribune. Clarence has been a member of the Chicago Tribune's editorial board for the past 30 years and is a regular guest on PBS, NPR, MSNBC, and other cable and broadcast networks. Clarence, the title of the show is This is America in the World. I want to concentrate on the This is America portion. So when you look at America, what do you see?
Well, I've always said I see America as a land of opportunity more than anything else. It's the one word you hear that causes more people to want to come into this country than leave it. And today we're seeing that resulting in a country in transition right now, like the rest of the world. But like so much of the world, it all starts here, and certainly being in the media, I see it all through the eyes of media folk. We're going through our biggest transition since the invention of the printing press. And I think it's indicative of how a century ago, as we were going through the industrial age, the beginnings of the new industrial age, we're going into the new digital age now. We're only beginning to figure out what that means, but it both terrifies me and excites me.
I used to ask the question, technology is a good for the country or bad for the country?
And the answer is yes.
Well, the answer is it's here. Deal with it, right?
That's right. The answer is yes, it's both.
How is it affecting your work?
Well, it changes everything, of course. When I came into this business, when I decided I wanted to be a journalist back in high school, newspaper columnists were the king. You know, we had the great almighty platform, and that was long before bloggers and all that. The biggest change, this is the age of do-it-yourself media, and that's a great thing. I think in many ways is what the founders had in mind with free speech, free press, that you can have this great dialogue going on and empower the ordinary citizen, no matter what age or race or whatever, to have a voice. On the flip side, it puts a new obligation on news consumers and information consumers to shop around. You know, when somebody is peddling a story that says, we've got Barack Obama's real birth certificate, or we have the evidence that George W. Bush was a heroin addict or whatever, you know. We, the news consumers, have got to, caveat emptor, buyer beware. And that's the side that doesn't get talked about enough because we're being bombarded with information, but where are the filters for the reliable information versus everything else?
Is the responsibility on the person producing that story or offering that story to do their research more thoroughly? Is that what you're saying?
Again, the answer is yes to everybody. The people producing it are obliged to be ethical and to tell you the truth as far as they know it, or the facts as far as they know it. But we're also obliged as consumers to keep a jaundiced eye, as the old Chicago City News Bureau slogan used to say, if your mother says she loves you, check it out.
I want to go back to the idea of America being in transition. Democracy, wasn't that part of the design concept right from the beginning, that we would always be changing?
Yeah, as a democratic country, that means you've got the voices of the people speaking out. As a democratic republic, I should say, for all those fastidious people about language. Empower the ordinary person, which is ironic, of course, because our founders were not ordinary people. They were white men with land. That's who was allowed to vote back then. But they, as Thurgood Marshall said, the spirit of democracy was in the founding documents, and it took time in the amendment process to bring them closer to perfection, a more perfect union, if you will.
So we have this country in transition, as you say. Good choice of word. Yet some people want to hold it back, right?
That's the nature of conservative versus liberal politics, or just the point of view, conservative versus liberal. The liberals always looking for new evils, while the conservative is content with the existing ones. That Ambrose Bierce, not a direct quote, but basically that's my favorite line in describing liberal versus conservative, because there are those who want change, and there are those who say, oh no, we're doing fine now. In fact, we were doing better back in the 1950s before that Elvis came along.
But change provokes fear in people, huh?
Some people, yeah. Other people are excited by it. I think that's what the difference is. I think because I'm very excited by change, but I was always a restless kid. I wasn't satisfied with the world as it was when I was a kid.
Is America on the right track?
I think we're on the right track on the long haul. And that's been true since the beginning. I mean, even when this country legalized and sanctioned slavery, we were on the right track in the long run. It was the short run we were screwing up.
Yeah.
But again, those founding documents had, Thomas Jefferson, slaveholder, wrote the most eloquent defense of the rights of man, equality, et cetera, while he owned slaves. That's obviously not a perfect situation, but he laid the groundwork for this country to improve itself in the long haul.
So as you look at America right now, what do you see as, let's say, the three biggest challenges that we have?
Three biggest challenges, let's see, besides straightening out our economy. But I think, even talking about the economy, our economy is changing. When I was a kid, we were a very industrial country. I worked in a steel mill myself, getting through college, and that steel mill is a shadow of its former self, and lucky to be open at all. We are not that kind of industrial country anymore, and so those jobs that didn't require much education, they're few and far between.
Yes, right.
That changes our entire way of looking at the future. The current generation of young people, my son's 25, his generation is the first one, according to polling in this country, not to expect life to be better for themselves than it was for their parents. I mean, this is a big change in the way Americans look at themselves. I want to try to restore that optimism in any way that I can, because I feel optimistic about the country in the long run. But there you've got a couple of challenges. There you've got the economy, the structural economic challenge. You've got optimism, the spirit of our young people. What kind of a country are we leaving for them? And what was number three? Well, education. I guess I kind of mentioned that in passing, because education is the key to the future, always was, and will continue to be.
Let's hold on that note, say to the folks at home. We're talking with Clarence Page. You know him from his writing, syndicated column, Chicago Tribune, all over the country. And you see him on television from time to time, and often, I would say more often than not, he's on television and has very penetrating things to say about This Is America and the world. Sit tight, we'll be right back.
This is America is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and the F.Y. Chang Foundation. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. The Republic of Kazakhstan, in the heart of Eurasia, a rich history, a culture of hospitality, and a future of development and growth. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing, and distribution services.
So let's go in a slightly different direction. You mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation this idea of opportunity. A lot of times you say to people, what comes to your mind when you think of America? And they'll say freedom. I've always thought opportunity. But here we have young people perhaps scrambling to get a job. Maybe their future is not quite as bright as our future was when we came up. Poor people. Of a huge poverty, and also minority people don't have a shot. Is there still an American dream?
Well, that's why I use opportunity instead of freedom, because when you say freedom to do what?
Yeah.
Freedom it's not the same as liberty. There are limits, and if you got money, you got more freedom than if you don't have money.
Yes.
So that's why I say opportunity, because even if you're poor, as my daddy used to say, when I ask, are we, middle class, working class? And he says, son, we's po. That means we're too poor to afford the O and the R. We're po. But you're going to get an education, so you won't be po no mo. So always remember that, because that's what I mean by opportunity. My parents were Depression babies, and so they knew what it was to have want. And I went to school with holes in my socks sometimes when I was a kid, but I always was told, college, you're going to college. First in my immediate family, my generation was the first to go to college, but college opened up opportunities, enabled me to sit here with you right now.
Dayton, right?
Dayton, Ohio is where I was born. Grew up in Middletown, nearby.
Right.
Go Middies.
What was there in your Almost, huh? What was there in your background that drew you to journalism right from the get-go, right as a teenager, right, huh?
Well, yeah, I have to credit Mrs. Mary Kendall, who was the advisor to our student newspaper at our high school, and I found out years later from her brother that she wanted to be a reporter herself back in the Our Gal Friday days, and people were told, well, ladies don't do that, you know. And so she spent her life as an English teacher, encouraging other people, kids, to go into journalism. I was one of the few that took her up on it, as she said years later. And but that and the fact that I didn't have much of a social life. I was pretty much of a dweeb in high school, and so the student paper gave me a chance to get out and meet people and ask them questions, get into their personal lives, and just to disgrace them before the public. So that was the beginning of my career.
Was it Ohio for college, university?
Ohio University, yes, in Athens.
And then off to the Army, huh?
Actually, to the Chicago Tribune. I was actually hired by the Tribune.
Before?
Yeah, I was drafted after I'd been at the paper about 4 or 5 months, and I was not alone. Those were the days. And but it was a time in which, well, this was the late '60s. As I say, I was a beneficiary of that affirmative action program called Urban Riots, because it was in the late '60s where overnight the mainstream media got interested in having journalists of color, and I was lucky enough to come along right at that time.
Interesting.
So I was always, although I worked just like all the other reporters, it was sort of understood that as soon as a riot broke out, it'd be Clarence. And so
we'll send you in.
And that happened a couple times.
Is that right?
People forget. Those days of the Kerner Commission and all that, we had over 400 civil disturbances related to race in this country between '65 and '69.
How are we doing as far as race is concerned in this country right now?
Well, the first answer, of course, is, well, we got a black president, or biracial president. But I think, I'm optimistic. I didn't expect we would have a biracial president even in my lifetime. But I think that it exposed a lot of people. It made the dialogue more candid, and it aroused people on the conservatives in particular, who in the past were hesitant to talk about race because they felt defensive. Well, now that we have a black president, they don't feel so defensive anymore because they say, well, we got a black president, what more do you want? So it put a new edge now on the conservative argument that you should not turn to government to help you out. So a lot of things happen. The dialogue changed. Some folks say, including in my own family, say, well, things are worse than ever. People are more angry than ever. And I say, no, they just have more places to voice their anger now. And they feel more free to voice their anger on both sides. And I think on the web, while there's an awful lot of vitriol on the web, there's a lot of useful discussions going on, too, about race.
I want to circle back and say, you say some people in the family are very angry. What are they focusing on that provokes that anger?
Well, a lot of things, Trayvon Martin, the various other racial eruptions we have, but I think there's more candor, too, because these occasions, it's hard to call the Trayvon Martin case just really black versus white, because George Zimmerman is half Hispanic, right? So it adds a new angle. It shows that in this day and age, we're not black and white like we were in the 60s. We are multicolor, multiracial, multigender, and so the debate about difference and diversity has changed now, but not a moment too soon, because we are a much more diverse country. And as we saw with Mitt Romney's loss to Barack Obama, they completely misunderestimated, as George W. Bush's word, they misunderestimated the importance of voters of color, because Romney won a majority of whites, and he lost a big majority of everybody else. So it shows you how
what a diverse country we're coming now. Is that a little scary, the way that
some people
vote? But not to you?
Well, Pat Buchanan is terrified by how unwhite the country is getting. And he and I have had numerous dialogues about this, that this is the nature of America, the nature of diversity.
It is the melting pot, isn't it?
Well, I call it more of a mulligan stew, because the pieces don't melt. Everybody delivers their flavor to the pot. You absorb some flavor from the pot, too. But if we had had gone the way of the know-nothings before the Civil War, who didn't want Irish Catholics to immigrate. Pat Buchanan's Irish Catholic grandmother couldn't have gotten in the country, and he knows that. And so, this has always been an old debate in this country, but I don't see us slipping backwards at all. We've gained so much from immigration. Look at most of the new moguls in Silicon Valley, Apple, Google, a number of these other companies. One or both founders were either immigrants or the children of immigrants. So this is still going on now, and that's something that I'm very excited about.
But we can't seem to solve that immigration piece up on the Hill, can we?
Oh, we can solve it. It's all immigration debates is different than immigration. Immigration debates are always the most fierce when the economy's bad. When the economy's doing well, we say, y'all come, like back in the 90s. When the economy's doing bad, we say, stay away. And we got to build more fences and all this sort of thing. But meanwhile, immigrants come or go depending on how much economic opportunity they see.
If you supposing you were traveling outside of the country and somebody said to you, what are some of the characteristics of the American people? What would you say? We talked about freedom, we talked about opportunity, but what are some of the traits that we all carry around with us as Americans?
Ambitious.
Well, that's that individualism, huh?
I think we're a country of ambitious people. Some are more ambitious than others, as I remind my son when he hasn't done his homework. But the fact is that we are a country. The opportunity piece is very attractive for Americans. And this is why we don't make, working class Americans don't make the kind of demands on government that working class Europeans do, because they have a different way of regarding government. There's a sense that, well, I can't rely on government, so I shouldn't even try. And that varies from state to state. But people in the rest of the industrialized world are astounded that we don't have a better national health care in this country. Why it took Barack Obama to give us the rudiments of the kind of health care system we ought to have, in my view. But a part of it's just the American attitude. We're divided in that way. And the divide seems more fierce now because the communications are more efficient now. So we hear and see each other more often than before. Or we can wall ourselves off from opposing views too. But I think that's really what you see here in America, is that kind of dynamism that Americans keep pushing on.
Ambitious,
yep.
Patriotic, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, everybody has different ways of defining that, of course. But I think there is a love of country that you see when we are facing a common enemy, like 9/11.
Yes.
When that's something for 4 or 5 days there, we were a beautifully unified country here. And I mean, it didn't take long for the old political debates to start dividing us. But at times like that, Oklahoma City was another one. I mean, I can think of a number of disasters that occurred where we pulled together and people didn't ask questions about, what's your religion, whatever. They just pulled together to help each other, because when we have a common enemy, we do that. And
we're generous too, aren't we? We're generous people, aren't
we're generous privately, but not governmentally. We give more money to charity in this country than other industrial countries, but we give less money to the poor through government. So again, that's part of the nature of Americans. I don't necessarily like it that way, but it is a reality we're dealing with.
One of the things that I was thinking about as I was writing some notes to prepare for our conversation is I was focused on Washington. There's a Washington, and Congressman Dingell just quit. He said the thing's embarrassing. The system is broken. A number of
but he also got what he's always wanted, which was a national health care program. So,
well, that was the achievement.
Right. So I said there's always two sides to that.
But is it broken? Is Washington? I mean, nothing gets done really.
Well, the framers wanted it that way. I mean,
so you're not upset about that?
Well, no. Yeah, I wish things would get done. I'm glad some things aren't getting done. I'll put it that way. And that's what the framers were thinking of, because otherwise they would have had the framers would have had a parliamentary system if they wanted to get things done. No, they wanted the change to come very slowly. And so
you're not upset about that.
there's some things, I'll just pull something out of the air. A repeal of the First Amendment. There are a lot of people. There's always an underlying desire to censor in human nature. Many Americans would love to carve out some exemptions to the First Amendment, and in fact, there are some exemptions. Shouting fire in a crowded theater if there's not a fire. And there are exemptions. A lot of people love to carve out even more exemptions. I'm glad we don't have a system where you can just go out and just overnight change the Constitution. So there are reasons why. Everybody's conservative at some level. I always say everybody's conservative close to home, like my neighbors. I live in a very liberal neighborhood. Unless you want to change one leaf on a tree, you have got to go out and get a permit to mow your own lawn. I mean, it's just crazy, how people are close to home. But yeah, around the rest of the world, there.
This is what I was thinking about. Look at how fast the country can move when you talk about something like gay marriage or the legalization of marijuana.
Right.
Look at how fast the country can move. Yet
after a point now, this is the tipping point, like Malcolm Gladwell says.
But I mean,
remember how slow it was, and all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah, but the country, yes, people have been working on these issues for a long time. Yeah. God bless. But once it kind of caught, then it moved rather quickly, state to state, and it continues to move quickly. On the other hand, you can't get anything on a background check on a gun or getting assault weapons off the street. When not everybody, I'll take that back. When the majority of people want that change, it can't be affected through the Congress.
Right. And that's because of the difference in the way people feel about those two issues. On the background checks, for example,
but that doesn't
you're
seem to be a big
deal. Back in the 1990s, well, you look at it a little more closely. Back in the 1990s, Wayne LaPierre of the NRA, he himself was calling for background checks in congressional testimony. And then 10 years later, he's saying, oh, no way. And he won. They would not get background checks, which you're right, most Americans want it, but how passionately do they want it? That's the difference. See, this is one of those issues that divides Americans geographically and lifestyle-wise, as well as just through ordinary partisan politics.
But we had assault weapons off the street at one point, didn't we? And then that law kind of ran out, and now you can't get it back in.
You know what? It doesn't upset me. I'm an Army veteran. I agree with the argument that there's no such thing as an assault weapon. They're all basically weapons,
all weapons
are an M14, M16, they're weapons. Either one will kill you. So I think drawing that little assault weapons line is more of something that sounds like what you ought to do, but you don't end assault by banning assault weapons, is my point. And I think that's why the passion behind banning assault weapons is not as great as that on the other side of defending them, because the people who own them, especially rural people, for whom guns are much more a part of life. And I grew up on the fringe of rural culture, so I'm not afraid of guns. We had a gun club in my public high school. I'm sorry, grade school, and it's like, or at least among the grade school kids. In my region, it wasn't that unusual.
But isn't the idea behind that to take away a gun off the street that has a clip that can fire so many shots in such a short period of time?
I absolutely believe that those gigantic clips, there should be a limit, no more than, well, I believe that what was proposed was, I forget now, it was 7 or 10 rounds, somewhere in that neighborhood, whereas
you'd sign off on that.
You can go out and get a 100-round clip. All of this, all those technical aspects of it are indicative of how the passions rose on the other side. In the internet age, the NRA could organize much more quickly and get word out more quickly than before. So those passions had a bigger megaphone, and still do. And so they've been able to resist change and also get the votes together in Congress to resist even sensible gun reforms like smaller bans on the large clips. But at the same time, on the other side, people aren't as passionate about getting rid of guns or banning them. Back in Chicago, for example, was most aggressive on banning guns citywide, but you can just go right outside Chicago and buy guns out in the suburbs or the next state over. New York has been much more successful because they're surrounded by other states that have similar controls on the purchase of guns. And so, to me, if you don't do it nationwide or at least region-wide, whatever, you're not going to have that big of an impact.
Got just a couple of minutes more. Coming up on 2014 elections and then 2016 elections. Leadership, what do we need? What do we want?
I think Americans are looking for, when they say leadership, I find 9 times out of 10 they're saying they want somebody who agrees with me. That's a way of saying it. No, why isn't the White House leading on this issue? Why isn't the White House agreeing with me on this issue? This is the thing that I think that Americans more and more are becoming fragmented, thinking about their own district, their own town and city or area more than the national picture. And this means that we actually have less of an interest in international affairs than we had before, which can be dangerous. I mean, in 2000 we were like that, when the economy was doing really well. Americans didn't care that much about what was going on overseas, and then boom, 9/11 happened. And so I think that we're seeing a similar kind of a thing happen now.
For information about my new book, The Chance of a Lifetime, and online video for all This Is America programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. And now you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This Is America is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and the F.Y. Chang Foundation. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. The Republic of Kazakhstan in the heart of Eurasia, a rich history, a culture of hospitality, and a future of development and growth. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing and distribution services.